Where'd you live in Chicago?
So in Chicago, I was at Damon and what is that? Damon is this way. And what's that? I'm 2 blocks from the United Center.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you were in the west side of the city. But like the north, but like the good west side of the city, like the
I like to say west of the West End, but not the west side.
There's two west sides of Chicago. So
exactly. So you got West End and you got the west side. So I'm like right in the middle, west of the West End, but not the west side. But I mean, Chicago is block by block, so it really doesn't matter.
Right.
It really doesn't matter. So
I lived at 53rd and Woodlawn.
Okay. Yeah. Right before you go up to get on the highway that I would have to stay on. We needed to pass or whatever, not the official highway, but the bypass, the cutoff.
Just to get out. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, but you were going. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. So you were in Chicago. You were going back and forth to Michigan. 5 years. You're vested. Boom.
I'm out, and then I take a job in Chicago. And I feel like I was in Chicago for like 7 years because I ended up, buying there. So I feel like I was in Chicago for 7 years. And, I'd stayed at this one company for a while. I got laid off. That was a fun time for me. And I say that because I didn't have any children. So when I first got laid off, I had a neighbor who had been laid off, and it was party central for him. And we lived like blocks down the street. And so he was like, well, you laid off, you're going to hang out with my crew. And I was probably hanging out for a year before they were like, you need to recertify. And I was like, well, they was like, so you need to show us that you're looking for a job. And I was like, okay. So I applied for this company and I got the offer with that company, and I went back into, I was probably laid off for, like I said, for about a year. So I went back into that company and started working. And in turn, that was the company where I got I was on this project, and marketing showed up, legal showed up. We were opening new stores, finance. I was a finance person. Finance showed up, but we didn't have a project manager. So I went back to my boss and I was just like, we got these stores we're supposed to open, but we don't have a project manager. So like, what are we going to do? And he was like, I'll sign you up to be the project manager. And I'm like, I'm not a project manager. Like, I'm finance. We're going to keep count of the money. We're going to do the ROI, but I'm not a project manager. And he was like, well, you are now, because we deal in processes and all you have to do is to make sure this process goes right. Right. So at that point, I actually did it for the company before. And somehow when I went to the second company, they found out that I did it for the company before. So I got on the same project at this company. But it was kind of during that time when I was starting to put together the project, or the deck page. And I said to myself, I've done this, like pretty much you're making money for other companies. And these are $1 billion, Fortune 500 companies. So I didn't expect to make $1 billion, but I knew that I knew how to run a project, and the project was opening up a store, right? So in terms of the different experiences that I had, I've been in positions where I could fail, and I could fail miserably, right? At the same time, I closed stores, and there's a process in terms of how do you determine you're going to close stores and the impact it's going to have, because, you can close a store, but now you got to get rid of the real estate, right? And, so you got to partner with Treasury to see, do we have enough cash on hand, or do you sell that and help them meet that goal? But just with the different experiences that I had, I was betting on myself, and it was time for me to leave, just because, my father had passed and I had so much going on emotionally that, I took a trip. That I walked into the office one day and said, yeah, I'm going to take a trip. And then when I came back, I was like, yeah, and I'm going to put in my 2 weeks. My father wasn't getting any better, so I left. My father passed. I came back, and I just kind of decided that I'd already been doing research on how to open up an agency and which company I was going to go with. I was looking at several companies, and I just decided to, go ahead and decided on the captain that I'm with, and I moved forward. And I knew then that I wanted to focus on the business of insurance, because I came into the business in an emotional state. But I also knew what my goal was. Just like I had a goal I was going to go ahead and ride it out 5 years, get vested and leave. I had a goal when I went to graduate school. I knew what I wanted my starting salary to be. So I didn't want to give that up. And when I came in, it was slow for a little while, but it took me about 3 years to decide to get back in touch with my original goal was in terms of opening up the agency. And I just said to myself, at this rate, you are not going to make it. And by then, I had also realized that it didn't matter how long my father had been passed. I always said it was last year. I always said it was last year. And so by now we're 5 years in, 3 to 5 years in. And I was like, wait a minute, you got to stop saying it was last year, because it really wasn't. And I had to deal with that. And at the same time, I had opened up this business and I put it into a process, but I wasn't growing the process. I hadn't thought about 10Xing it. And I was able to kind of be in that state and still be in that mind state because I had other people, I had employees and they were showing up and doing what they were supposed to do. So, I looked and I said myself, I was like, okay, you've got to 10X, you've got to give it your all and see if you can do what you set out to do. And I will say again, that was like 3 years in. I struggled the first 2 years. And I say struggle, but it was one of those things that I got to a point where I told another agency, I said, I'm not afraid of pain anymore as long as it's growing pain. That's a different type of pain. That's a different type of pain.
It's a different type. That's right.
And then, I got there and I was able to fully live into what my dream was, or, my goal at the time, which was to open up a quote unquote franchise, to put it on automatic so I can go explore more of what I wanted to do. And that's how I got back into, looking into real estate again.
Let me ask you this question, because, there's a lot of opportunity, in this industry. And, sometimes when there's a new person and they're looking to find the right fit, it can be difficult. It can be a challenge to say, where am I going to have the synergy? What's going to be the right culture for me? What's going to match my temperament? What was your process of determining what company? One, how did you decide on the insurance industry as the industry to open that business in? Two, what was your process of determining what company you would align yourself with?
So I was still in Chicago, and my current insurance agent wanted me to get into the business. They had been there for 30 years and was kind of telling me about their company, their process. And at the time I was kind of like, that's sales. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a bean counter. That just didn't seem to work with my personality. But he kept at it, kept telling me about, look, I'm going to be retired, was actually kind of saying, hey, there's a lot of people like me who are leaving the industry. This is a good time for you to get into the industry. And so then, I don't know how, but I got put on another major company's list, and they started sending me emails and soliciting as well. And so then I was like, oh, this is too much. I don't know where you got my information from. You keep coming at me. But I started to kind of listen, because in terms of what I was looking for, he had done with his captive agency, right? And so, and then I remember I had joined Facebook. This was 2008. I joined Facebook. And, Facebook says, connect your email so we can find all of your friends. And so I did that. One of my friends was an insurance agency owner. And so I was like, hey, what you doing? Can you tell me the real deal? How does this look? Like, how does this work for you? Because we worked together in Michigan. So we had worked together in Michigan. I knew this person. And so we got on the phone. It's like, I think at that moment they had been there for like 3 years. And so they were old enough to kind of tell me, what they wish they would have known when they first came in, and they could still kind of remember that. And so I kind of did some more research, and I decided on the company that I'm with, because at the time I had this number one company, the guy, my current insurance agent in Chicago, who was pushing me to go with their company. But the other company, when you bought your business, if for whatever reason the relationship did not work out, there was a pre-signed contract in terms of what they were going to give me to say goodbye. In order for me to walk away, there's a pre-agreed amount that we would walk away on. With the other, just with one company, I just was just like, I just felt like they were, it's like, how did you get my information? But of course I was looking. So I did do some research, but they were not as large as the other two. So I started to focus on one, because branding became important for me. And I ultimately decided on the company that I'm with, because the other company, while it was what still is and is a great company, when you walked away, you didn't really walk away with anything. So for me, and there may be some additional caveats that I don't know, because I didn't choose that road, but it was very clear for me that with the other company, like if I wanted to leave today, there's a business for me to sell. with the other company, there's not a business for you to sell. So that's how I decided to do the captive that I'm with. That was important to me.
These are things to think about. Yes.
Yes.
So you decided to go with this company. You talked about the first 3 years, right? And how, there were some challenges, there were some struggles. One, you stuck it out. And I remember hearing when I first got licensed that your first 3 years was going to be the hardest. Always, and then I also have heard, hey, we're underpaid for the first 5 years and overpaid for the rest of our lives, right? And this is something that you can see manifested in this business. Tell me a little bit about those first few years. Like what were some of the difficulties that you had, and what kept you motivated to keep moving forward beyond that?
So the first thing for me was leaving corporate, and I gave myself, my salary was cut by 60%. So that was, I'm sorry, say it again.
That's one challenge.
But that was the biggest one. Yeah. I mean, I remember literally I woke up and I was just like, I don't know how I'm paying my bills, right? Because I still had my condo in Chicago. Renters were not doing what they were supposed to do. I was getting more fines because, from the HOA than anything else. And I just had so much going on. I decided not to renew the lease. So now I had to pay it. I prayed about it, obviously, before I made that decision, because I was just like, okay, obviously, I need help going through this too. But that was the big thing. But also at the time when I decided that I was going to give it all. Now, again, I'm talking about the business of running an agency.
Yes.
So I was paying myself a certain salary, but my business was fine. So there was money in my business account.
Right.
But I was still paying myself a certain salary because there's a P&L, right? Like, yeah, I own the business. And if I wanted to be a sloppy business owner, I can just go take the money, right? And let my accountant figure it out. But I had a goal, and I knew how much money I needed at the end of every year, at the end of every month or quarter or whatever, in order for us to survive. And my first thing was to save enough for salaries, so I couldn't just go and take that money. So when I say the first thing was me taking a 60% pay cut, but my business was doing better than I was personally. If you looked on,
right.
If you looked on paper, if you just compare business accounts, right? So I would say that was the first thing. And I think the second thing was just realizing that for me and in the industry and being whether you're in Georgia, Texas, Florida, it's kind of like I am from Texas. So I'll say, you got to go home and you got to go big. Right? So think about a business owner who owns a restaurant. Your restaurant can be really popular, and nowadays social media can help you drive people in. Social media for insurance was just getting started back in 2012, but I'm licensed for the state of Georgia. I can market to my 5-mile radius of city that I live in, or I can market to the state. Right? And then I also look at it from a perspective of, I have agents there 8 hours a day. So how many times on the phone are they going to be there doing the quote? And so that money that I had in the business account, I know exactly how much it was. And I said, one thing in terms of me betting on myself, I believe that I could figure it out.
Yeah.
I used to say, I might, F-word it up, but I'll figure it out. So you got both sides of that. And the other way of looking at that is opportunities and challenges are built together. So I had this business, I had already invested in it, but I was in my challenge moment, right? And so I needed to take that. I took that money and I said, and at the same time too, and even at that time, I loved my team members. I still have probably all except for one today. And it was one of those things to where they didn't want to telemarket. I had a good group of agents. And I just said I would make the phone ring. Like, they're not going to dial out, but they'll pick up the phone, and they know how to quote, and they know how to overcome objections and all of that other stuff. So every month, I just took that money and I kept investing into marketing, right? And then I had to manage my P&L even more because I was spending more than what I had forecasted for myself on that. But we were doing great. We were doing better than expected after a while. So much so that my God sent agent, who was the first agent that I hired into my agency. And when I say she was a God sent, she was, because she had worked for the company for a long time. I still didn't know my phone number. We were both in training. She was telling me which way to go in training. And I was like, I'm so glad I saw you because I don't know. I'm still trying to figure all of this out together. But she called me one day and she said, you are bringing this agency to its knees. That's because the phone was ringing so much and we didn't have enough agents for the quotes.
Wow.
And so, but what she didn't know was that I was already negotiating to not only buy another agency, but to open up another one. So it was also in that moment that while I had this person who was very critical and crucial to me my first 3 years, I knew in terms of where I needed to go and where I wanted to go, because I was able to really look at the business and assess and look at how we market, where we market, and what I'm going to spend on that. And I start hiring and all of that. I knew that that may be too much for her. And shortly after, she did leave, but it was a gracious left. Like, in terms of, I called some other agents, hey, she's looking for a spot. We opened up the second agency. No, I purchased another agency. And then I opened up a second agency at the same time. And I don't know what made me do that. But looking back, I think I had just gotten to the groove of really learning what I needed to do to master, maybe master is too strong of a word, but I really got into my groove to make my agency grow. And, I was on skates. We were going places. So I wasn't willing to let that go. And here we are today. I think since then I purchased 2 agencies. And next year sounds like another ripe opportunity for me to purchase another one. I think that this business, in terms of, you can get in at different levels. And if you get in at the individual level where you are, whether it's life insurance and you're selling life insurance, whether you're a producer in someone's agency, or whether you get in at the agency ownership level, I think the first 3 years, can be difficult, right? I think the first 3 years are going to provide you with some challenges, but there are also opportunities, and it is there for those who want to overcome that. I use several different quotes to kind of help me throughout, like what you focus on expands. And so I just focused on getting good employees, showing them how to do about the process, and also marketing, right? One of the ones that I use is one of the ones that I said here, opportunities and challenges are bundled together.
Hey, I'm holding on to that one. I'm just like,
so, I would just say from the standpoint of, you just mentioned like, your first 3 years and the rest of your life are different. I think that this industry can provide a great opportunity, and, you don't necessarily have to get in on the individual level. You can get in on the agency owner level. You're going to have, I remember one of my coworkers called and they was like, oh my gosh, you have your own business. I want to be like you. And I was like, I still have challenges. I have different challenges. Like, I don't have to quote unquote report to a boss, but I have employees now that, they're reporting whatever their issues are, they're reporting them to me. And my job is to partly solve those issues. So I just think that if you look at both the opportunity and know that, like, it may not always be rosy, but there is something on the other side of that. I think the statement that you made about the first 3 years and the rest of your life is a good statement to apply to the industry.